Okay, well, I'm going to go ahead and start. Looks like I got 15 people here, 14 or 15 people, and we had 15 people register. So we're going to go ahead and start. Hopefully, let's see here. So if you're listening, everybody, I can't tell if anybody's even in the room or if they can see. And I can't see a chat window other than the Q&A session. So I guess if you have questions or something like that, go ahead and ask or whatever, and I will try to answer them and forward them on to Stacy. Got a couple announcements. Since our normal user group meeting is the first week in the month, our January meeting would fall around the New Year's, and so we're not going to have a January meeting. And our February meeting has been postponed to the 11th because we lost our classroom at the Microsoft office. So we're going to have, so I'll send out announcements as usual about the meeting on the 11th, but instead of the first Thursday of the month, it's going to be on the 11th, which is, I believe, the second week of February. So that's all the announcement I have. We have scheduled SharePoint Saturday for March 21st. We're in the process of getting the website up and running, and registration will be open soon. We're lining up speakers, so if you guys would like to speak, the call for speakers presentations is open, and also we'll be contacting everybody about sponsorships, of course. And so, yep, February 11th is on a Tuesday, so that's a little bit different for us also. So it'll be a Tuesday instead of Thursday, and it's the second week of the month. But anyway, that's all the announcements I have. I want to turn this over to Stacy. Stacy leads the user group in Cincinnati, Ohio, and she's an MVP. And so she has graciously volunteered to present to us this month. And so I'm going to turn it over to her.
Thanks, David. I appreciate it. All right, everybody. I'm going to share my screen out here. David, just let me know when you can see it. Can you see it, Dave? I can't hear you if you're talking.
Sorry, I turned off my mic. I can see your screen and I can see the video of me.
Oh, okay, perfect. I'm gonna move you down a little bit, but you're still here.
Yep.
All right.
I'm gonna mute myself.
All right, everybody. So one of the most important things when it comes to setting up a Microsoft Office 365 tenant these days is one of the things is that Microsoft deems it pretty easy. You know, you can go out and you can subscribe and you click next, you give it your tenant a name, next, and boom, you've got a tenant. I'm one of those firm believers that Microsoft missed a perfect opportunity to make sure that everybody's configuring their actual Office 365 tenant correctly, or even just call out things that they should be looking at. And we're going to go through some of those. I have, by the way, as you can imagine, voiced my concern to Microsoft that I think that's something important. And as I go through some of these things I'm going to be showing you today, I'm sure that you're immediately going to say, wow, I wish, Microsoft would have told me that, or at least, brought it to my attention. So we're going to go through some of those things today, and then just some things that'll help you overall, help you administer your environment, and some things also to help you think outside the box when it comes to it. So we'll start with some pretty easy things, and we're just going to come down. Of course, we don't have time to go through all the admin centers. I literally do a half-a-day workshop around all of the admin centers, but I'm going to kind of skip around a little bit on the things that I think that are the most important that you need to look at in making sure that you have a very safe and secure tenant. And then as well, just ways that you can use information that Microsoft is providing you. So one of those is you have a home page, just like, think about a SharePoint site. And the great thing is you can actually decide what you want this home page to look like. Not everybody has the same function, roles or functions that they handle in their environment. And so you can actually rearrange this and only put up things out here that make sense to you. So you have the ability to go and add a card. If you notice here, so if you're someone that deals with billing, you could drop a card here around billing. If you're a data loss prevention person, you deal with security and compliance, maybe you want this there. So all you got to do is literally just a drag and drop type of scenario, and it puts it right onto your page. So you have a great way to, things that you immediately want to see, you can actually make sure that you see them here. They also do provide you, this is what they call light mode. They also provide you a dark mode. So if you're someone who likes things a little bit darker to spice it up, feel free. You have a little bit to make it to do those kinds of things. All right. But one of the things that Microsoft doesn't really call to your attention is, as we know, things change a lot inside the Office 365 world. Every Tuesday, they send out updates, but what are those updates? What are the big things? Well, an area up here called What's New. And if you select this, it will actually take you out to the Microsoft site and to a section called What's New in Microsoft 365 Admin Center. And then if you notice, it breaks it down by each month, the things that have been released. You'll go down and you'll see all the different changes. Here again, here's September 19th, and it really breaks those things down for you. Also notice, a lot of times people don't, have time to sit here and go through that. You also do have the availability to download this as a PDF, meaning you could probably put a hook into this and automatically download it each and every month if you wanted to. All right. So it pretty much on every admin panel that you go to, there are things that you will see. And one of the ones I want to call out is the training and guides. Microsoft literally has provided you some already some training materials on, on administering your Office 365 tenant, customizing, your setup, and then how do you go about training your users. So they're providing more information out here for us to use. However, one of the things I tell everybody, you shouldn't have to be an administrator or have some role inside the admin panel to get to some of this type of information. So my thing to you is always think about outside the box. How can I get this to my users, or how can I make my job easier with the information that Microsoft is providing in here? So this is one of those areas where you have your training for admins and all this kind of stuff, but a lot of people don't realize it's out there. So you can call it to their attention, put a link on one of your sites, or whatever you want to do. It's just something out there that they can call to attention. All right. One of the other things I always like to do, let me show all here, is underneath settings is the thing we're called organization profile. So this is really setting up what your organization looks like inside of here. Notice it will actually give you, the name of your company, where it's located, all that kind of stuff. And this is also where you will be able to identify what your release preference is. There are two different types of release. You can be a targeted release, which means like Microsoft puts out things early. So what we call first release, and you can actually test, see if your stuff breaks. If it's a new piece of functionality, you can test it out. Can my company utilize this? Should my company utilize it? And if no, make plans to turn it off. If yes, identifying the governance around it, that type of thing. I always suggest as well, anybody that's in Office 365, make sure that you do have a dev tenant and make sure that you're turning it on so that you get first release, so that you can test these things before it gets into production. Or just like I always use it as an example, how groups was deployed. It was deployed out to the world, and people just started creating groups like crazy because no one knew, that for one, that Microsoft not only introduced it, but they turned it on by default. This gives you the ability to catch those things, but before it actually hits production. In a lot of the EA agreements, I know they're calling them something slightly different now. Within the last year or so, in many of your licensing agreements, you get a free dev tenant. So if you don't have one right now, I would definitely go ask people who are in charge of your licensing to check to see if you have a free dev tenant. But if you don't, setting up a SharePoint, or if you're an Exchange person, setting up a dev tenant is not very expensive, and you don't need a whole lot of licenses around it. But the need is there. So some other things that you have the ability to do is manage the custom themes for your organization. In here, essentially, you can put a logo. You can put a logo up here, and then you can actually say, I want this logo to be clickable, and where do you want it to go to when you click on that logo. The things I will warn you about when it comes to these is make sure that you're reading the very fine print down here, that it must be in HTTPS and 200 by 300 pixels, but in any format, any size. And then if you notice down here, if you upload the image, it pretty much says the same thing, but it tells you which formats that it must be in. And then what the largest size that it can be, which can become kind of cumbersome at times to getting it down to those specifics, but you do have to keep those in mind. You can also set a background image here as well, which then you essentially, instead of black up here, I could make it something else. And then if you set a theme, you can also select to prevent your users from overwriting the theme that you have created, right? And then up here, of course, it's showing you where you can change your navigation bar. If you don't want it black, what you want it. If you don't want the text in white, what color would you like it there? And then, of course, an accent color. The other thing on here is showing the display user's name. I didn't realize for a long time because it wasn't out there yet, but I noticed one day that I had always had my name up here in a picture, and then the next day it just said SD. That is because they added this feature. If you want to see the full name, you can, or if you just want to see the abbreviation, first name and last initials, then it will, this is what will make it do that. So if you just want to save space or you don't care, you have that option as well. The other thing is to keep in mind, if you need to re-theme later on, say you get a different marketing person, the colors change or they don't like it, instead of going through and trying to rip it all out, you do have the easy thing called remove the theming, and it'll set everything back to the default for you. Okay, so that's kind of how to make your tenant a little bit more personable to your organization. The other thing is you can actually add custom tiles for your organizations. Now, a lot of times, most of us call this thing up here the waffle, but you can actually add additional icons up here or tiles to things that are not, out of the box Microsoft. Like if you use Paycor or Concur, you could actually create a tile and then have it set and then have it tagged right here so that your users could get to the Paycor very easily. So this is just setting up one of those tiles. All you're gonna do is just say add a custom tile, give it a name, the URL that you want it to go to, brief description, and what image do you want it. So on the image, notice that this is a URL. You could put a URL of, say, an icon that's out there on the web, and it will automatically do what it needs to do to bring that image in for you. And it's a quick and easy thing to do to set it up. The thing you have to remember, it is based off of a timer job of showing in the waffle. So once you set it up, you may want to take a few minutes, go do something else before you actually test, because it may take a minute or two before you actually see that new tile. Okay. One of the other big things is through working in many big companies, through my life and all that kind of stuff is, even though people know that companies have a help desk or whatever, or they're like, they have a ticketing system, people say, hey, who should I contact about this? Or, what is that URL for me to put in a service desk ticket? Well, Microsoft has provided us an easy way to actually customize to provide the help desk information for our users. So by going into here, you can actually turn the card on. and you can give it a title, whatever your help desk is called, or if you just want to do something snazzy like it has here, called needs support. You can put your help desk phone number, extension, their email, and then you have a help desk URL. So this, you could literally say open a service ticket and then the URL to the option to open up that service ticket. Once you have all that set in here and you save it, again, you'll have to refresh a couple times. It will take a few minutes, but then from any site except here in the admin, but from any site, when you go to the question mark up in the upper right hand corner, and essentially in that case you would scroll all the essentially all the way down to the bottom, and then you'll see all that help desk information entered. Now, to me, it's a little cumbersome that I have to scroll all the way down on the actual question mark to see the help desk information. What I'm being kind of told in the roadmap of the future, we're going to be able to adjust what we want to see first, second, and third, so that we eventually can make the help desk information show up as number 1 if you want to. But you can populate that information now and then just use, send out a training thing to your users saying, hey, we've provided you this, just go to your question mark, okay? The other thing is if you ever have to deal with Microsoft calling in a support ticket, sometimes, especially if you're dealing with a slow tenant related issue, sometimes they will ask you, well, can you tell me where your data is located at? They're actually referring to this here, and even though if you're in the United States, they should all say North America. However, this is something to check when they ask that, because I did work with a client who was dealing with some slowness issues, and they said, well, can you check your data location for me? I'm like, well, they're in Texas, so it's going to be North America. Well, let's check it. And I checked it, and literally their data was not sitting in North America. Hence why they were having some slow issues. But this is what they're referring to when they're asking you that information. Okay. All right. So the other thing that I'll hit a little bit now, but we'll get into a little bit more, is the whole reporting scenario. One of the things that Microsoft has jumped leaps and bounds when it comes to this new admin center is providing you more information than you could ever imagine wanting out of an admin panel. But essentially what they've done is taken the need for you to always need a third-party solution to find out some of the easiest things about your own environment. So they've added a lot of different types of reporting into the environment. This one just happens to be on general usage overall. But notice here you have the Office 365, Exchange, OneDrive, SharePoint, and you can click on any of the data points, right? I can go up here and say I don't want to see Exchange and make Exchange go away, or OneDrive, and I can kind of get down and grill down a lot with that. Notice they've as well have given you 7, 30, 90, and 180 days. So they're providing you a lot more information. You can go individual reports if you want to see them as well for up here. If you want to drill into them a little bit more, say you want to go really check in on these OneDrive files, it's going up, so why is it going up, right? So again, notice you have 70, 30, 90, and 180 days. And if you go down here, you can start to see who the principal people's names are, who's using it, how many active files they got, how much storage you're using, etc. However, the main thing I want you to look at is the fact that all of these are exportable. If this information is exportable, it means that you can essentially get a hook into it to pull this information automatically, utilizing Flow, or something to that nature. Most people should be using Flow at this time to do stuff like that, because essentially that's where it's going. But you could actually pull a lot of this report information straight into SharePoint, so that then you can reuse the data, connect it into Power BI. You can see charts and graphs. And the great thing about that is it means that you're not always having to go into the admin panel to see if you're having problems. Most people, they only open up administration here or even on-prem if there is a problem. We don't schedule times that we're going to go out there and say, hey, today I'm going to go check usage, I'm going to go check, sites, and then I'm going to clean up the ones that aren't needed. Never happens. Something always prompts us to do these types of things. With them providing us reports and stuff like this, we have the ability to then hook into them so that in our day-to-day sites, so think about IT or your Exchange SharePoint site you might have or whatever, you can actually reuse the information that Microsoft has provided to you, and then that is giving you visual representation of things that you need to take action on because you're being notified. You can see it, right? So that's very important. So you have reports all through all the different admin panels. There are even the ability to create your own reports as well. But these are things where I say start really thinking outside the box. Hey, this is great information, but I am probably not going to come out here every month like I should to run a report to know sites I need to clean up or whatever. So this is time to start thinking about how you can go in and pull that info. Okay. So I'm going to go back to my home page so I could get to it from here. This whole health thing, I'm skipping security and compliance because we're going to go in there in a minute. But under health, we have this thing called service health, which actually kind of shows you if you have anything that's degraded services when it comes to SharePoint, Exchange, etc. Notice I put these cards on my homepage because these are big things for me. But if I go to, say, the service health, it essentially shows you everything that you have available in your tenant and if it is healthy or if there's a problem. Well, luckily we no longer use Skype for Business because there's one incident open and clearly service is degraded. But we have SharePoint Online and OneDrive that there's a problem. So if I click on my OneDrive, it's telling me can't access content, OneDrive for Business. Here's the ID if I ever need to call into Microsoft and do a follow-up. It's telling me that my service is degraded at this time and when it started and the last time it was updated. Notice it's been out there for a few days, right? But it'll let you to kind of hone in on what's going on. Now, one thing I will tell you is that when Microsoft does updates on your tenant, either pushing out the new bits or just say there's an upgrade of some sort that needed to be done, they will not flip your environment into stating that it's degraded at this time because of an update or anything like that. If you happen to notice that all of a sudden your environment becomes very, very slow, chances are, unless they've triggered something else out here like we saw here, most likely it's them doing an update. If you enter in a support ticket, they will actually reply, hey, your tenant was going through an upgrade. I've kind of stated that I don't believe that that's a valid way to do it, because if they're doing an update, we should be able to read here that your environment is in the middle of an update. That way you don't have to worry yourself about a support ticket, etc. Just my kind of 2 cents about that. So then we also have the thing called the Message Center, which, as I said, I always put on my home page here, but you can get to it from health here as well. Now, the Message Center is that lifeline for you on how you can kind of stay up with all the changes and everything that are going on. However, I go back to, I don't believe that it's also something that we should keep to ourselves. Now, you could have multiple administrators throughout your organization. You may be big enough that one person is your Exchange, or 1 or 2 people are your Exchange. You have SharePoint, you got OneDrive, you got Teams, etc. You may be big enough for that. Most organizations aren't, though. So keeping up with things that they're throwing out here for us can become very cumbersome. The other thing is the more and more that Microsoft is making the technology usable for what they're calling the makers, the harder that is for admins to know what types of functionality that our users are utilizing. right? We don't know how many flows they're creating, what types of flows they're creating, power apps, all these different things, right? So if my thought is if we are going to allow them to do those things on their own and be these makers, that they should be seeing this information just like we do. Now we may trim down the information, they may not need to see it all, but that, you know, it's going to depend on your company, but we need to find ways to share this with everybody. Now Microsoft has provided a new role so that you can give people read access into here, but you're giving someone read access into an admin panel to the message center. So the cool thing is here is when you find something that you want to look at. So we're going to look at new feature, introducing file upload for forms. So when you select the option, notice over here, you can say if you like it, if you don't like it, mark it as you've read, or if you want to read it again, you can say, hey, mark it unread, and you can copy a link to your clipboard. But they go through and they kind of tell you where it falls on the roadmap, how does this affect you, and what you should do to prepare for the changes, right? So they give you a lot of information. This is one of those areas where I say, don't reinvent the wheel. If this is a new feature that you plan on, you know, sharing with your organization because it's going to help you, copy and paste this information either into, I don't know how you do, an email, through your intranet or whatever, but Microsoft has provided the info for you and just reuse it. The other cool thing is you can be reading this information and say, you know what, this is going to drastically affect how our marketing people do X functionality. So I have this option that I can share. So when I hit share, notice I can put up to 2 email addresses here to send this to somebody, right? You have the ability to also say, I want to receive an email. So it's 2 other people or 2 other email addresses and yourself that you could send this to. So you can select, yeah, let's send it to me. I'm going to send it to this address. I also want to do a personal note. Hey, saw this in your invoicing process or something, right? And then, whoops, I can't spell today. And then they can see the same information that you read, and then you can hit share. Now, the fact that you can actually automatically tie this into an email and send it means that there's a hook into it. Means that there are ways that you could go out and pull the information into the message center, into, say, a SharePoint list that then you can filter one way or another and display information for your users, or to provide them a link. That way, they're seeing this information being generated in the system the same exact time that you are. So now you're kind of eliminating that whole thing where they say, well, you guys have known this for months, why didn't you communicate to us? Well, guess what? We can't know what everybody is doing, but if they have insight to this, they become not only makers of these things, but people who are also helping with their own, first line support, because they can say, oh, hey, that feature is going to be deprecated. I'm going to have to change that, or I need to put a ticket in with support to see how we can change it and overcome these changes that are out here. Again, Microsoft is supplying all of this stuff for us. All right. So you also have the ability that you can select preferences here. So say you are in one of those bigger companies where the only thing that you have to deal with is SharePoint or OneDrive. You can literally select or unselect the things that you want to receive or not want to receive. All right, so if you don't want anything on Yammer because you don't have Yammer in your organization, you're not using Kaizala, you're not using Dynamics, then unselect it. No reason for you to have all these unwanted messages coming through if you're not utilizing them. And then, of course, you have some email preferences. Send me a weekly email digest. Send me emails for any major updates. Send me emails for data privacy messages that happen to come through. And then I can supply a primary or a secondary type of email address in here so that I can get those emails someplace. So again, this is something you could set up and email into a list or whatever so that users can access it as well. So again, Microsoft is providing this to us. Let's just find ways that we can share it with everybody else. It saves us time as well, but it makes your users feel a lot more powerful if they can go out there and they actually can get ahead of this stuff as well. All right. Any questions so far? All right, I think we must be doing good. All right, so essentially those are the main things up here. Other than I do just want to show, because I didn't realize that a lot of people didn't know this, but when you are out creating a tenant and say there's a lot of new functionality that's out here, but is not anywhere else, right? So you have the ability to select a user. So say you got an E3 license and the only thing you're going to do right now is exchange, then you can actually say, fine, then you can remove all the rest of the apps and stuff that they have associated to them so that right now they can only do exchange. So if you notice here, I've got an Office 365 E3 license, Power BI, the free version, all that kind of stuff here. But then notice I've got 27 apps listed because of what I've selected up here. If I expand this, I can then see all the apps that they have access to, which means they'll show in their waffle to be able to access them and all that kind of stuff. So you make it easy for them. But again, say, what if you're not using Kaizala, right? What if you're not using the Staff Hub? What if you're not going to be deploying Teams or you use something else for Stream? You can actually unselect what you don't want your users to be utilizing, and then they won't be able to click on it and literally start using it in their day-to-day task, their task orientations. And then for you to find out that, hey, we're not going to be doing this, and you turn it off globally, and then those users say, hey, we were using this, right? So only enable the things that you really want your users to utilize. As time goes on and you grow inside your Office 365 tenant, then add the additional functionality and the additional applications. But starting out of the gate, I would take it a little slower, because you guys really want to make sure that you're putting processes and procedures and stuff around this before you release to everybody else. Okay, and then like I said, it's pretty easy. And then the other thing that you can actually do is, as you're creating users, you can actually create licensing templates now. So you can say, if you're only starting out with Exchange and a couple other things, you can create a template. So any new user, when they're created, that's the template that is applied. And then of course you always have scripting available too. So when you want to enable the additional functionalities, you can script it so that and update everybody with the new applications you want to supply them information to. Okay. All right. So we're going to hit SharePoint real quick here, because there's really not a ton of things in SharePoint, but there's some very powerful ones. Again, notice on my home page, I have my message center and I have my service health. And my service health is just directed to SharePoint because that's the admin panel that I'm in. Okay. Notice again up here, I have SharePoint file activity report, usage report. So again, more reports that Microsoft is providing to us. And if you go into the details, notice you've got the 70, 30, 90, and 180 days. Again, it's exportable, right? So Microsoft, again, they're supplying it to you. It's there for you to use. And where did my go thing? Go back here. Right. So above that, the other thing that I find that very, very useful is the whole active sites thing. Okay, so in here now we can see all the sites that we have. Slightly misleading on the whole template thing. As everybody knows, if you go out and create a group site, which is the default, when you go to create a site, you have, it says team site, but technically you're creating a group site. The template name is team site. If you create an actual new modern team site, it actually is called Teams as well. What I mean by that is when you go to create, this here, which is called a team site, is actually creating a group site. All right, notice it says connected to an Office 365 group. So it's already a group site for you. If you go to your other options, notice you have an option up here for a team site. So this is literally the replacement for the team site template in Classic. So it's just the same thing. It doesn't have, you don't have a group associated to it. You can't associate a Teams app to it. You can't create planner. You don't have all those additional collaboration things that you do with a group site. Literally just the replacement for the old Classic team site. So that is as well is a template called Team. So when you read here the template, it always is not very clear what actual site it is. If it says team site, it could be a group site. It could be a group site, or it could actually just be that actual the team's replacement. If it is a Classic site, you will see that it says team site, and then it will say Classic experience next to it. Okay, but the thing here is that they're allowing you to see them all. But if you scroll to the end of any list, by the way, you're going to see something called customize columns. And you can actually go out here and actually select the columns of information that you want to see. So say I want to see external sharing. Also note I've got arrows for up and down, so I can actually order the columns how I want them. Once I have them all selected, I can say apply, right? Now I see the external sharing. And then, so now that I have this information, I can actually export it. Again, you can then put it into SharePoint, because some of the things that it shows one, the storage being utilized. It shows you the last activity. You can see when it was created, who created it. But then if you notice, you can actually see how much of the storage is used, if it actually has an Office 360 group tied to it, right? Files viewed or edited, page views, and the number of files. So when you think about pulling this information in and you haven't seen a site used in 6 months, and then you go out here and no one's even viewed or edited anything, you know, in a while, or say you find a site that looks something like this, none view or edited, no page views, hey, it only has 1 file, chances are that this site is not being utilized, especially if it's been sitting that way for 8-9 months, whatever, you know, however often you're going to check this. But pulling the information in, exporting the information with this will help you determine what are valid sites versus not valid sites, so that you can clean everything up. All right. So, so then you can pull that into your other site. The one other thing that I will tell you is that if you have created a site and you messed something up, say you put the name wrong or something like that, so you delete it, but you go to recreate it and it says it already exists, chances are it's sitting out here in your deleted sites, and you'll just need to go out here and delete it, and then you'll be able to recreate that. We didn't really have that option before in the whole Classic side, because if we deleted it, it literally just, it went away. But now, because we have the ability to actually restore these sites if we needed to, they're held here. So it's not going to allow you to create another site the same exact name and whatnot if it's sitting out here because of this ability. Okay. We have some policies on sharing. So this is one of those areas that, you know, by default is very, very open, right? So this is one of those areas I think that Microsoft should say, hey, you need to go out here and look at these settings and adjust them as you need. Now notice you see SharePoint and OneDrive. The reason that these do this, because if you notice as I move the SharePoint one down, the OneDrive one has to move. So OneDrive can never have more permissions, allow more permissions than what what SharePoint has, right? So if you know, if I move this up, it won't let me go any further, right? If you go into the OneDrive admin, which is right here, you will see this same exact scale. It's the same one. They're not two separate ones just because it's in the OneDrive admin and this one's in SharePoint. They literally are the same exact one. All right. So you'll want to make sure what you want to allow people to do when it comes to external sharing with SharePoint and OneDrive. You have some advanced settings under here. If you want to limit external sharing by a domain, guests may sign in using the same account to which sharing invitations are sent, and all that kind of stuff. So you want to go out here and actually set what you really want these users to be able to do. You can set expirations of any link I send out, I want the expiration date. Man, they have 7 days or 14 days to go and get that information, or otherwise it's cut off. Because you don't want to leave it open-ended forever. You want to make sure that you're expiring certain things out, but notice by default, it's empty. So definitely one of those areas you want to go out there, review what you have, and then make sure that it gets set the proper way. And then, of course, use that information that you've got here and put it straight into your governance. All right. That's the one thing is Microsoft is very good at giving you a ton of information out here that you can reuse to throw either into your governance site or your document or whatever you need to. Okay. They have recently added the home migration manager piece here. So it's where you can migrate your content to SharePoint or OneDrive. They had the migration manager for a while now, but now they're just starting to add more of the stuff in here so that we can see it and add tasks and such. I've not done a ton of playing around with it because the migration can only do certain things. It's not like a ShareGate migration tool or AvePoint or anything like that. It's very driven from on-prem here. If you're not using managed metadata and all these kinds of things, it's a great tool, but it's not for everybody. All right. API management, this is literally just your app management that you're used to from seeing an on-prem where you can go and approve different APIs into your system. And then more features here. This is where you can go back and see, here's your managed metadata term store, here's your user profiles, the search, and all these things that you're used to seeing, in on-prem. When you come out here, now it was one of the biggest things. I couldn't get to my term store for the longest time, and then so they finally gave us a way to look into this stuff, while they're kind of figuring out what's the best way for long-term of how we're going to manage these types of things. So we do now have these options, so we can go look at these. Keep in mind though, when you open these, just like user profiles, which it takes a little bit to open, so I won't waste your time with that. But when it does open, it looks just like it does in on-prem SharePoint. So it's very familiar. You're not having to relearn anything or anything like that. It's just really just giving us a picture into it. They just take away the things that we can't do any longer in there. Again, OneDrive admin, it's the same pretty much as the SharePoint with the whole sharing stuff. So we go here. There you go. See, it's essentially just the same exact thing. And you have, of course, then you have some sync options and storage stuff in here as well that you'll want to make sure that you're reviewing. All right. So if we go back here, and we're going to end on this one called security and compliance. But just like you have the new Teams admin panel and some of these others, and pretty much in every admin panel out here, there are things you want to go out and check. You want to check the settings, what the defaults are, what, do they adhere to our company? They're moving more and more towards policy-driven things. So like you have policy packages now. You've got, higher education. You get different things that they have. They are providing, let me see if I'm trying to find the one that they just moved. They just moved one that didn't used to be, which was if you use Teams in the app. I'm trying to find where they moved it to because it's now inside of a policy. But on Teams, where you here we go. This is, I believe it's what we want to see in here. So you have different permission policies. So you have, what you'll see is a global wide policy, but you can actually go out and change these policies. Say you have certain groups, you want to see certain apps, those types of things. So if you're in the Teams app, in the app, and if you go to the additional apps that you can add in there, there used to be just literally just a page that showed all the, the default apps that were out there, and you could literally uncheck the ones you didn't want everybody to see. Well, now they've provided you, you can set up different policies, and you can say, hey, allow all the apps that are out there, allow specific apps and block others. So when you change that, then you have the option to then select the ones you want or you don't want. And then you have options for third-party apps as well, and then tenant apps. So they've really added a lot to that, but these are all policies that you need to go out there and identify what you're going to use. Like I said, every single one of the admin panels has these types of things. You just need to go visit them and make sure that they're being customized to your company's needs. The one, and I'll hit it quickly, it's underneath Azure Active Directory, is a thing called company branding. Let me come up here real quick. So, So company branding, and it's set under Azure AD because it's how you log in, what you see when you log in. So you can add banners and logos and wordage to these about what you want to see. And I actually brought mine up. So actually, I really did. Okay, so it's not going to show. Oh, actually, because I brought it here. So if you notice, me logging into my environment, as soon as it saw my email address and it saw my domain, it knew that this was my domain, right? So it brought up my my logo here, and notice I have some words down here. So these words can be like your policy on logging in. But the biggest thing about what this does is I know I'm logging into my environment and I don't have a phishing pop-up box. If you see one that is plain or a different logo or whatever, then you know that someone is phishing you and they're trying to get you, they're trying to get your login, your login username and password. So it helps cut down on that. So, and then of course, when you sign in, oops, I timed out. Of course, because I was logged in as the other one, but essentially you get to see, your logo and all that kind of stuff. Like you can even set the background. So if I was to log back in as my own here, go here. Oh, it again. Yes, please. And then it'll let me log in, but now it's just being difficult. But anyways, it would literally show you all that. If I open this one, which just shows you exactly what ours is set to, you'll see this would be my background image. This was on the banner. Here's that text that I dropped in. And then notice I could actually change the color of the background if I didn't want a logo there. And you have some other images that you could log in there as well. And then also notice down here, show option to remain signed in. So if your company policy is after 10, 15 minutes that it automatically logs you out, then you want to, of course, make sure that you do not show the option to remain logged in. So it helps you drive your policies that your company has has laid down for that. All right, so that's that. And then we'll wrap this up in the security and compliancy, because this is something that is very, very beneficial. Two main things in here. There's a ton in here for one. It's overwhelming to look at everything out here. The word has it that they're going to break this out into security and compliance into 2 admin panels again, because of the sheer number of things that are landing out here, because there's just a lot to it. All right, so one of the first things I want to show you is the service assurance. It says update industry and your geography settings. So if I select this, I can decide, I can let them know where, I'm in North America, I'm in Germany, wherever I reside. All right. And then I can state what industry that I'm in. I'm in education or technology or whatever. And then once I select it, I can hit save. All right. So once I do that, and I go back here, I can then view trust documents provided by Microsoft or view service compliance reports. And these are now based off of the settings that I chose as my geography and the type of business that I'm in. So any FedRAMP reports, these are the ones that I would have to, I'd have to comply with. I'd need to read these. Are we doing these? If so, then we have to comply. GRC assessment reports, same thing. If you're using it, here's the ones that, you know, what it means to adhere to them and what you need to do. Same thing with ISO, and then same thing with SOC compliancy as well. So again, Microsoft is helping you, letting you know what you need to be, you know, what reports you need to be watching for compliancy reasons. Again, also, Microsoft is providing this information to you, links to all these different things. Then as you're building out your governance, you could literally link them to these documents that Microsoft is referring to. What that means is inside of your governance, you're linking to something that someone else is updating, right? So you don't have to go all the time and recreate the wheel. As long as you're linking back to the information that is being provided to you, then the information is always going to be correct. So it helps it helps keep that stuff short and sweet, but allows you guys to be very productive and help keep up with your governance. Microsoft provides you a lot of information in here on ways to keep up with your governance just by the sheer ease of being able to copy and paste the information they provide you or linking to it. But the other big thing, and the one thing I would challenge everybody, if you have access to the admin panel, is to go out and check one thing today. And that thing would be your Microsoft Secure score. Notice this tenant says it has a 92 out of a 502, which means in any security auditing that would go on, this environment would totally fail. Notice that it breaks it out between identity, data, device, apps, and infrastructure as well. And then it kind of shows you where you're kind of going up and down with your score. So if I click on the Microsoft Secure score, you go out here, kind of shows you the same review that you just had. It shows you you haven't completed 50 of these. I've completed 5, and 1 was resolved through a third party. So it's essentially kind of telling you that. But what it's doing is various configuration pieces within your environment have been reviewed and they've been given a weighted score. The highest rated score is around MFA on accounts. So the biggest one is MFA on your Azure AD privilege roles, making sure that you have multi-factor set up for those, right? Notice it's a 50, right? So you get 50 points by just making sure that you have MFA added to the AD privileged accounts. The second one is MFA for all your users. If you're not using some type of multi-factor in your environment, I can guarantee you that you've had hackers come in not to be detrimental to your tenant, but just to prove that they can set forwarding rules. Seems to be the thing. There's all kinds of things that they're doing. They're essentially just proving a point that they can get in. I had a situation where I was having a problem with my account. I had to put a ticket in with Microsoft. They notified me, hey, we need to disable your MFA temporarily because we believe that is what caused your issue. And I'm like, that's fine. I just really need the problem fixed. Microsoft forgot to turn it back on when they were done. And in one day, I was hacked by somebody. They sent something out to every one of my contacts that I had, which, by the way, is a lot, with an attachment. And then if someone actually replied to that email, someone else was actually replying back to them. So in one day with MFA not turned on my account, I got hacked pretty severely. So if I can get hacked with the things that I do, everybody else, you can get hacked. So you want to make sure you're being secure there. And then again, like I said, it just goes down and it goes through all these different things here of that need to be configured. The cool thing is most of these things are very, very easy. Turn on audit data recording. So if I select this, notice over here, says it's not complete. Again, Microsoft is providing you all kinds of information, what compliance controls you have, what are next steps, how do you, essentially, what do I need to do this? You can put in notes here. You can review it. So when you hit review, what it does is take you to the exact place, wow, that's pretty, where it needs to be turned on or configured. So they even give you direct links to resolve or set the information that's put into the secure score, right? So each one of these would be pretty easy. A lot of them, as you notice, either 1s or 5s or whatever, and it is literally just making sure you're setting something up, clicking a button, yes or no, or something like that. So they're very easy to do. So I would make sure that you're going through this with your organization, find out what you have, and then make sure that these things are handled. Like I said, they're very easy. Also, again, where Microsoft missed the boat and could have put this stuff as part of setting up your tenant to go out and check these things or do these things, so you essentially can have a green little checklist as you go down. The one thing that also you can do is you can also say, here I have this marked as not complete. So I'm going to say this because I want to see the third party thing here real quick. I go back here. You can actually, why is it not setting my thing? There's an option. There you go. Here, so if I am using, say, Okta or Duo or something like that to manage my MFA stuff, I literally can put a note in here saying we are utilizing Okta or Duo for this, and then I can say it was resolved through a third party. Once I say it's been resolved by a third party, and I put notes in, essentially put notes in there, I'm suggesting you put notes in there. You're not forced to. But you put notes in there saying who handles it, select this. You get the points because you've stated, hey, we have a third party that handles this for us, and I've dictated who that is, right? So then you get those points. Again, you can reuse this information as part of your governance, okay? So this is the area I challenge everybody to go check or have someone who does have access check it. Like I said, some of them are super easy to get set up and configured. Some of them take a little bit more work working with network, security and compliance, personnel within your organization. But this is very, very important because it's what makes your environment very secure. It's something I ensure my clients do before we put we start putting the first documents out there, because there's nothing like putting all this time and effort to put in confidential data and all these processes and procedures and everything inside of SharePoint, only to allow people to come in and hack it and things not be secure. So if I could stress anything within the new admin panel, it would definitely be going in the security and compliance area and checking this out. David?
Okay, I'm going to check to see if we have any questions. I don't see any questions. So there's a Q&A area in the application. If you guys have any questions you would like me to ask Stacy, go ahead and ask them through the Q&A. I see a lot of people have indicated that they're here through the Q&A, so I know that you can see the Q&A, but I don't see any questions. Okay, well, with no questions, then I think I'm just gonna share some announcements.
Okay.
Again, Stacy, thank you very much for presenting this month.
No problem.
And I really appreciate it. And so for everybody else that's on this call here, just the announcements again, no meeting in January. Our February meeting was moved back to the 11th. It's a Tuesday. Registration links and stuff are on the website. There will be no March meeting because of SharePoint Saturday, which is on the 21st. And then we are also working on, we've got most of the year already scheduled, but we're still looking for presenters for the rest of the year. So that's it. That's all the that's all the announcements we have, and have a happy holidays and happy New Year, and we'll see you guys on in February.
Awesome.
Thanks.
Well, thank you very much, David. I really appreciate it. And if anybody has any follow-up questions later, feel free to reach out.
All right. Thanks a lot, Stacy.
All right. Thanks, Dave.
Okay. We'll see you. Bye-bye.
Bye.